Burnout isn't just about stress, it's actually your soul begging you for a change. And if you've been ignoring it, yeah, me too. This video is for the girl that is literally hanging on by a thread, for the version of me that was trying to hold everything together and literally thought that burnout was just a phase instead of a warning sign. So let's talk about what burnout actually is and some of the warning signs if you think you're going through it currently. And mostly the things that I wish somebody would tell me when I noticed that I was starting to burn out after deciding to start over. So, what does the burnout loop feel like? It could be a day-to-day cycle. The loop is obviously cyclical. So you will wake up tired, you'll push through your entire day, you'll overwork yourself doing all the things that you need to do, including work, probably getting to the gym or to a workout class, probably cooking dinner, probably hanging out with friends. And then suddenly you crash because it's not sustainable. And then you guilt yourself for crashing, you overcompensate, and then you burn out again. And that is when the burnout loop continues. It's very cyclical and it is super hard to break the cycle because we as a society just completely normalize burnout. And the problem is that burning out feels like we're doing something wrong, like it's our fault, when in reality, it is because we are living in a system that is not sustainable for our lives. How I got stuck in the burnout loop. I definitely began to go down kind of like a self pitying spiral after my first layoff. That was because I was already experiencing corporate burnout where I was doing a lot of the same things over and over again, like just like we discussed in the burnout loop. I was trying to hold everything together thinking that I was doing the right things, but in reality I was doing nothing that filled my cup and made me happy. So I would burn out every week. I would work and literally live to see Friday, and then from Friday to Sunday I would spend my time out, either partying, I would be getting drunk with friends. It's literally what I would do. I would just want to forget about all of my problems, and then Sunday would come, I would get the Sunday scaries, potentially cry myself to sleep, and then wake up on Monday morning and tell myself to put my big girl pants on and do it all over again. And that's how I survived every week living in the corporate world. It was atrocious. And I would overcompensate, like about feeling good about myself by like working late. I would never say no to projects, or I would try and, be the overachiever and make impress my managers or people higher up than me, when in reality I just really hated what I was doing. So nothing that I was trying to do to overcompensate would make up for the fact that I was simply tired. And nothing that I did was going to prove my worth, ever. But I didn't realize that at the time, so I was stuck in the burnout loop. When I look back, hindsight is 2020, that loop began to become pretty dangerous, obviously, to my spirit, not just draining, but dangerous to me as a person, because I noticed now that I was, being very self-destructive in my personal life because I hated what I was doing every single day. So I was using coping mechanisms that I thought would help me, and I was trying to fill a void, when in reality the problem was that I hated my job, and I was just burnt out from trying to pretend that I liked it so much. This is why I think burnout isn't just personal, but a cultural and societal and systemic problem. We have this cultural pressure, no matter what, to do more, to bounce back faster, to hustle. Obviously, like we have this whole big movement of like hustle culture, and we see it on social media all the time. People waking up at 4 a.m. to meditate and take vitamins and go to the gym at 5 a.m. Like, just completely unnecessary things, unless that floats your boat. But that's not for everybody. It's probably not for the majority of us, actually. But the issue is that the current state of our country rewards productivity over rest. And now we live in an age where we are expected to be ultra productive. You know, you should have the full-time job, you should have the side hustle. Sometimes you have to have the side hustle because you can't afford to support yourself off of your full-time job. And if you are just working a full-time job, you know, you're expected to be like climbing the corporate ladder or working to do more. It's always about more, 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 more. And that doesn't really leave any room to prioritize rest ever. That is why I truly believe that rest, reflection, and reinvention, that whole hitting the reset button, is actually a radical act, especially when those things don't come with instant results. And what I mean by that is if I were to take time off from work or just completely decide to stop working a job and hit the reset button, that does not necessarily prioritize productivity. It actually, in a sense, is working against everything that you might have been building in your life. And you're not going to see instant results, but you are reinvesting in yourself in a way that will build you up long term. And that is a radical act. That is a radical act in and of itself because the hustle culture that we live in does not promote you putting yourself first. It actually puts money at the center of your whole entire life. Okay, so for me personally, breaking the cycle were the smaller wins. That meant walking away from this idea or expectation that I constantly had in my head of working a full-time job or having this 9 to 5, climbing a corporate ladder, when I literally could not see myself doing that in any capacity. I also started to commit to my health and my wellness by doing CrossFit, and I invested a lot more time there because I knew it was an activity that was enriching me, not only physically but mentally too. I got to a place where I could not go 2 or 3 days without being in the gym because it was helping my mental. Even moving back home was a radical act because that meant that I no longer had to prioritize individualism. I was able to actually think about working more as a collective unit with my family, with my mom, and it kind of took away that pressure of like, okay, you need to do everything by yourself, you need to make the money, you need to have the apartment, you need to have the job. Moving back home was a radical act of literally saying, fuck that. No, I don't. And I'm going to do this my way. And it's not normal. It's not super glorified to have to move back home when you're 27 or 28, especially in our society. It was a radical act and it was something that I needed to do for self-care. Reinvention is not necessarily a 180, but it's more just that interruption of the burnout loop. And of course, it's always supposed to be done with intention and self-trust. Otherwise, there is no reason for you to try and break out of that loop because it's going to remanifest itself in another way if you don't realize now that you are burning yourself out. Here's an important question that maybe you can ask yourself. Are you tired from doing too much or from doing too little of what actually matters to you? How do we change it, right? How do we start? How do we spark that first flame that will ignite the whole change and the whole break in the burnout loop? So for me, what I'm doing differently now is slowing down while still building. So for me, that looks like learning how to freelance with intention, something that gives me purpose and something that kind of decenters the whole idea of chasing a paycheck for the rest of my life. Setting boundaries is another huge point that I think that we often don't prioritize, but setting boundaries with work and even other things like gym, family, content, you have to set boundaries with everything in your life so that you have momentum and space to take care of yourself. I also started to romanticize like my routine and being present and just creating the freedom that I deserve, because restarting can oftentimes not feel super freeing. Sometimes it feels like, you know, you're rebuilding, you are limited. It can feel like you don't have access to much that you might have had access to before. But you really have to find a way to romanticize the freedom in restarting or starting from scratch, because it really is a beautiful thing. It's like painting on a blank canvas. Conclusively, I want you, the viewer, to know that if you're feeling burnt out, it's not that you're lazy. It is that you are quite literally carrying the weight of a system that doesn't care if you burn out, if you're good, if you're rested, if you're well fed, anything really. But the power of making small shifts can really change your life in radical ways. I talk a lot about walking away from corporate life, walking away from my 9 to 5, which I know is a very dramatic and radical thing to do. Not everyone watching this video can do that. So, where do you begin? Well, you start small. You start small with maybe setting boundaries, maybe not overworking yourself, and you start to think about the things that actually matter to you, and you start putting that at the center of your life rather than things that actually don't pour into you anymore. It is really up to you to redefine what success means to you, so that you're not feeling burnt out all the time because you're not reaching this unattainable version of that success. And again, we are really in this together, okay? So I am documenting my journey as a fire starter, not just as a guru. So I don't have all the answers. Burnout is real, but so is reinvention. So if you're rebuilding, whether that be financially, emotionally, creatively, this space is for you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.